Hello. Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for being here today. It's a little bit of a different video. Today I'm doing a book roundup, just going over all of the books that I've read so far this year. Last year and this year, I had goals to read one book a month because I used to read a lot when I was in school, and then I kind of fell off of it. Before this year, the last book that I read was a pregnancy book, and that was in 2020. Now that I have more time, I have been reading a lot more, and I started out this year reading a lot of books that I already had. I wasn't like buying new books. So yeah, I'm just gonna go in order from like the first book I read to like the last most recent book that I read. I'll try to give a synopsis of everything and like what I would personally rate it, and kind of some explanations of like why I chose to read the books that I did read. Again, some of the ones in the beginning were books that I had purchased like previous years. I was just trying to get through my personal library. So that being said, the first book that I read this year in January was The Secret Garden. I got this book from Goodwill, and I think it was only like $3 or something. I read this book in the 6th grade. It's been a long time, obviously, and it is one of my favorite movies, the 1993 version, I believe. This past winter was really, really bad. It's my first winter here in Utah, and it was the worst. So I was kind of like yearning for some spring, summer vibes, and I watched The Secret Garden because it was streaming on one of the platforms, and then I saw the book at Goodwill, so I thought, well, why don't I start reading this book, because maybe it will help me get through the winter. This is, for me, just a nostalgic read because, like I said, I read it before and I have loved the movie. It was a good transition to get back into reading because it's not a very dense book. It's considered like children's historical fiction, so it's kind of like middle grade. Obviously, I read it in 6th grade, so it's a middle grade book. It has really beautiful garden descriptions, and there were a couple of times when I was like laughing out loud, actually, which is interesting. Like it's not like a comedy or anything, but I think I was just like, I don't know, like giggling about like the kids that are in this story. I give it 3 stars. It's a pretty average book. I wouldn't say it's like a page turner. It's not something that I was just like dying to find out what happens. I mean, I already know what happens. It's pretty average paced, I would say, but it's just about a girl. I'll read the back. Mary Lennox needs some magic in her life. Her parents have died in a faraway land, and Mary has been taken to a mysterious mansion to live with her distant uncle. She has no friends and no joy until she finds the key to a wonderful secret garden. Now Mary will discover what miracles can happen and that magic is real. Again, really beautiful descriptions of gardens and like springtime, and my daughter's knocking at the door because she's trying to get out, but it's quiet time. But yeah, again, just like a really like average book to transition back into reading something nostalgic, something really like simple, and it's not like super dense or anything like that. The book that I read in February was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. My face here. This is a fictional autobiography. Sorry, I have my notes here. That's why I'm looking down. It's a fictional autobiography, like a modern classic. I bought this at a used bookstore, I believe in Fullerton. I don't know if they're still there, but it's a thrift find, basically. I read this over the span of 3 days, so it's pretty short, as you can see. I think less than 200 pages, or just about 200 pages. Yeah, 200 exactly, actually. So this was a pretty quick read. I didn't read it consecutively the 3 days. I kind of like spread it out here and there whenever I just felt like picking it up. This wasn't a page turner. It's actually quite like an emo book is what one of my old coworkers, I posted on Instagram that I was starting to read this book, and she was like, oh yeah, it's pretty emo. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, It's a fictional autobiography because it's based off of Sylvia Plath, but obviously the story follows like a fictional character. The Bell Jar is a novel about the events of Sylvia Plath's 20th year, about how she tried to die and how they stuck her together with glue. It is a fine novel, as bitter and remorseless as her last poems. The kind of book, my book is like, it's cut off here. Oh, I think they're saying the kind of book Salinger's Franny might have written about herself 10 years later if she had spent those 10 years in hell. The timeline on this guy was like a little bit jumpy and confusing. That was like one of the things that made it really hard for me to like follow along with this book. The chapter starts off in one summer, and then the next chapter starts off like months ago, when she's like somewhere else, and I had to like step back and like reread things a little bit because I wasn't sure where in the timeline the book was at. So that was like a little hard for me. The book was published in 1971, and there is a little bit of like a racist encounter, or I wouldn't say a little bit, like it's definitely like a racist encounter. It's not all throughout the book, it's just in one particular encounter that she has with somebody. And so obviously, you know, that didn't hold up very well. I just wanted to read this book because I bought it a long time ago at a used bookstore, and it's Sylvia Plath, so I thought, okay, like, let me pick up a literary classic. Would I read it again? Probably not. I feel like what I might do with this is go and find like a little free library and probably put this guy in there and give it away to somebody else. But I mean, it's a pretty average book. Also, you know, definitely gives you some insight into somebody who is dealing with depression and anxiety. 3 stars for me. After reading this one, I wanted something like a little bit more upbeat. So I picked up this one. I wouldn't say that this is also like a really like, this isn't something like super joyful. This is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. I bought this at a local bookstore in Riverside, California, from where I'm originally from. This is a mystery crime fiction. I also read this in February over the span of 4 days. So in February I read 2 books, which I was pretty proud of myself for getting. I mean, obviously they're both small, like, you know, this one is a little over 200 pages, and there's a lot of like graphs, and the chapters are small. I mean, like, I think one chapter in here is literally like a page or like half a page or something. Christopher John Francis Boone knows all the countries of the world and their capitals and every prime number up to 7,057. He relates well to animals but has no understanding of human emotions. He cannot stand to be touched, and he detests the color yellow. This improbable story of Christopher's quest to investigate the suspicious death of a neighborhood dog makes for one of the most captivating, unusual, and widely heralded novels in recent years. This was a really good book. I really enjoyed it, and it's a quick read. Like, you can really, like, you can digest it pretty fast. Clearly, I did not have the time, so I was like reading it over the span of 4 days, but it's a real page turner. It gives a really interesting perspective into the mind of someone who is autistic, how they handle like social interactions, how much they can overcome despite, you know, having like social awkwardness and not really understanding social cues. And yeah, it was very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. The next book that I read was Nancy Drew, The Secret of the Old Clock. This was also a nostalgic read for me. I read Nancy Drew back in like the 6th grade, but I saw this guy at Goodwill and I wanted to pick it up because it's actually a dual cover. So it has both number 1 and number 2 on here. I haven't read number 2 yet. Eventually I will. So this is obviously children's middle grade mystery fiction. I read this in March over the span of 2 days. So this one was super, super, super fast. It's a mystery. However, if you look at the title, the mystery is solved. So it's not like the most like groundbreaking mystery or anything like that. But again, just like a nostalgic read if you just want something super quick to get through. Maybe I feel like this is a good one to read like with your kids probably. I feel like that's like another reason why I wanted to pick this up is I like the idea of giving these to Ellie when she's old enough to read them, and you know, possibly we can like read them together. But yeah, I gave this 2 stars only because like it wasn't really like a compelling story. Again, it's solved. It's already solved. I already solved it just by looking at the title. I have other like middle grade or like YA novels that I read and like was more captivated by, so I just feel like it's a 2-star for me. I think the thing that's like the most interesting about it is just that it's Nancy Drew and it's a dual cover, and you know, and it's a hardcover too, and it's more just to have this kind of like a classic, you know what I mean, in your library. That's how I feel about it. This is the next book that I read. It's a manga. It's my very first manga. I've never read manga before, but this is Sailor Moon, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon, Volume 1. I saw this at Savers and I snatched it. I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. I was really hoping that they would have more volumes there, but they only had this one. So I picked it up because, like I said, I've never read a manga before, but I love Sailor Moon. I used to watch it all the time with my cousins. Like, how cute. There's Usagi. Or Serena, whatever. I grew up in the era where the dubbed version, her name was Serena. Let me know if you grew up with the dubbed version as Usagi or as Serena. Because the one on Hulu right now, she's Usagi. And I just feel like there's certain voices that I remember as the characters, and they're not hitting it. This was really fun. I mean, really, really quick to get through. I think I probably read this in like 1 day. Oh, 2 days. So I probably stopped and had to like read it the next day, but literally there's pages of just like flash. It's just like super, super quick to get through, but like really fun illustrations. And if you are a Sailor Moon fan, again, nostalgia's getting me. And I feel like when you go thrifting, that's what you're gonna find. You're just gonna find a lot of like nostalgic stuff. I feel like you're not gonna find too many like newer books at the thrift store because people still kind of want to hold on to them. But that was a cool one to come by. 3 stars is what I gave it because it was just quick and fun, and it's like a cool thing to have in my library, in my personal library. The next book that I read is Peter and the Starcatchers. This isn't a retelling of Peter Pan. It's the story of who he was before he became Peter Pan, and like before he meets Wendy, before there's even like a Neverland. I really, really enjoyed this book, mainly because I am such like a Peter Pan fan, but I just thought it's so clever. I got this book off of Thrift Books. When I was in Goodwill with my daughter, she had grabbed the second book, the Peter Pan and the Shadow Thieves book, and put it in the cart. And of course I was like, what are you doing? I was trying to get it out, and then I realized that it was a Peter Pan book, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll keep it. But then I realized also that it was the second book in the series, so I picked this guy up from Thrift Books. So this is a middle grade fantasy fiction novel. I read this in April over the span of 7 days. I really liked the way that the chapters were laid out because it really kept you wanting to like read more into the story, because one chapter would follow one group of characters and then it would move on the next chapter to like a different group of characters, and then each chapter would always like leave off on a little like tiny cliffhanger, so you would want to keep reading it. The story's really intriguing. They were really clever in how they introduced magic. I'll just say it as magic. I don't want to give away any spoilers, but if you're kind of like a Disney head, if you like Peter Pan, if you like fantasy, I think you'll really enjoy this. I gave this one 4 stars. The book that I read after that was The Unhoneymooners. So I also got this one off of thriftbooks.com. It was like the first romance novel that I read this entire year. This one was really cute. I read this book in the span of 4 days in May. I was influenced by Book Talk. After all of my reading, I was like doing so much research on like what I should read next. And I really wanted to read a romance because I hadn't read one yet. But this is like enemies to lovers trope. It's kind of like a PG-13 rom-com, fade to black. Olive Torres is used to being the unlucky twin From inexplicable mishaps to recent layoff, her life seems to be almost comically jinxed. By contrast, her sister Ami is eternal champion. She even managed to finance her entire wedding by winning a slew of contests. Unfortunately for Olive, the only thing worse than constant bad luck is having to spend the wedding day with the best man and her nemesis, Ethan Thomas. Olive braces herself for wedding hell, determined to put on a brave face, but when the entire wedding party gets food poisoning, the only people who aren't effective are Olive and Ethan. Suddenly, there's a free honeymoon up for grabs, and Olive will be damned if Ethan gets to enjoy paradise solo. Agreeing to a temporary truce, the pair head for Maui. After all, 10 days of bliss are worth having to assume the role of loving newlyweds, right? But the weird thing is, Olive doesn't mind playing pretend. In fact, the more she pretends to be the luckiest woman alive, the more it feels like she might be. I really liked the banter between the couple. I think the only thing that kind of like threw me off was the epilogue. I felt like it just seemed like kind of forced. Didn't really make sense to me based off of like the characters. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 3.5 stars. The couple's development definitely was like exciting. The conflict between them though, I feel like was kind of like lame, because it definitely could have been resolved like a lot faster if like the guy hadn't been dumb. But again, I don't want to give it away any spoilers, but obviously, you know, this has a happily ever after in it. I did read one other book before the next book that the next romance book is a really short, sweet, quick book. It was Steal Like an Artist. I borrowed this from the library. I read it in a day. I like took notes on it because I just wanted something that would like fuel like my creative juices. And I gave it a 4 stars. All the books that I'm gonna go over are all being borrowed from the library. I have been using the heck out of my library card, and it's come in handy. And my library even gives me a receipt when I check out a book, and it tells me how much money I've saved since using the library. And I think I've saved like almost like $200 from like reading all these books. The last book that I read in May was It Happened One Summer, but I read this book in 2 days. I'm pretty proud of myself. I feel like as I started reading more, I was reading more books within 1 month. It's about a city girl who gets cut off. She's like a socialite, and she gets cut off by her stepdad, and so she has to move to this small like portside town to like learn her lesson or whatever and like understand the meaning of money. I really liked this book because it was a dual point of view, so you get like his and hers perspectives, which I really appreciate. The spice level was like 4 out of 5. I did give the book 3 out of 5 stars. It's a pretty average romance read. After I read It Happened One Summer, I like immediately put Hook, Line, and Sinker on hold, and I read it in June in 1 day. I like picked it up at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I just like couldn't put it down. And I think I read up until like midnight, just trying to like finish that book. Of course, I was getting like interrupted all throughout the day, but I really enjoyed it. Hook, Line, and Sinker is friends to lovers, and it follows the sister from the first book. What I really liked about this book was that they were like music lovers, and so they would always give like music recommendations to each other, and then I would always like go on my Spotify and also like play the songs too. This was also dual point of view, which again I really enjoyed. The spicy level on this one was more like 3 out of 5, but I gave it a 4 stars, mainly because I think I liked the couple a lot better. I think the couple dynamic resonated with me more. I also really liked the character, the main female character. I liked her a lot more. She had other things going on in her life that weren't just about like her getting with this guy. The next book that I read was Book Lovers, another romance. I read this in June in 5 days. Also borrowed it from the library. This is also like a city girl in a small town kind of story. The female main character is a book agent, and the main male character is a book editor. They have to work together to get her author to write her next book, but they're located in this small town where he is from. The small town that they're in is the setting of her author's last book that was like a really big hit, and so the town is trying to come together to promote it and get it to be this kind of like tourist attraction. I guess like you could say another trope that's in this book is like close proximity. I don't have the book, so I can't like read the synopsis for you. This was also pretty spicy. I would say like 3 out of 5. I did enjoy this one more than I liked It Happened One Summer, so I gave this one a 3.75 stars. It wasn't quite a 4. I think there were certain parts that like I kind of felt let down. I really liked the sister dynamic in this book. It was much stronger than the 2 other books. Like Hook, Line, and Sinker, you already know that Hannah and Piper are sisters, so it doesn't really focus too much on their relationship. The sister relationship in this book was like definitely like one of my favorites, and I like when there's other relationships happening outside of like the main couple. It adds to the story and it adds to their characters. It wasn't better than Hook, Line, and Sinker, I would say, and I don't think that I resonated with the characters as much as Hook, Line, and Sinker. The next book that I read, also in June, was The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I read this over the weekend in 2 days, but this is like a fake dating Grumpy Sunshine trope. Much like a lot of Ali Hazelwood's books, they're within the academia realm. He is a professor and she is, I believe, like a postdoc is what they call it, or like a undergrad. I cannot remember the terms. I'm definitely not. I really enjoyed the bonus chapter of Adam's point of view. I really like when there's a POV that comes from the guy. It reveals a little bit of the mystery of like what's going on in their head. The dialogue is like witty and it's funny, and I loved her relationship with her friends. I gave this 3 out of 5 spicy peppers, and I gave this a 3.75 stars. I would definitely recommend it if you're like getting into like the romance novels. The next book that I read was Better Than Fiction, but I read this in June, also in 2 days. Before I read Better Than Fiction, I had purchased Twisted Love, which is another like spicy romance book, and I think I was kind of just getting tired of like so much spiciness. I was just like, is there anything else? You know, I kind of just felt like, where are the guys who are just like wooing women? But like, I just want to see some real romance, like true romance, and this is what served that void for me. Better Than Fiction is about a girl who inherits her grandmother's bookstore, and she is by no means like a book person. She was a photographer, she liked to travel. When she inherits the bookstore, she kind of, you know, puts her previous life on hold so that she can live up to her grandmother's expectations of what she thought her grandmother wanted for the bookstore. There is a book club that her grandmother used to be in that regularly meets at the bookshop, so they're all like pretty much like aunties to her. The book club arranges for an author to come and do a reading and do like a Q&A, and when he comes, he's like incredibly gorgeous and like really sweet and nice, and then he says that he is planning to write another book that is set in the city that they're in, which is Denver, and so he kind of wants to explore the city and get a lay of the land for like the setting of his book. And so she naturally is like, oh, I know a lot of places here, let me give you these suggestions. And then he's like, oh, how about you just come with me and I'll give you some book suggestions for you to read, because he knows that like she's not really like into books. So that's how like they kind of start to spend more time together. She also has like a bad relationship with her dad, which is the son of her grandmother, so she doesn't have a good relationship with him, and he's trying to like obtain the bookstore somehow, and he's like upset that she inherited the bookstore. The female main character, she was like really relatable. I felt like the writing from her point of view was really relatable, and like it felt like I was talking to a friend. The main male character, I just thought he was adorable. He's like the most adorable book boyfriend. There is a spicy scene, but the spicy scene doesn't like overpower the entire book. It's just like 2 out of 5 is what I would rate it. I will say though that I wish that there was more storyline between her and her half-sister. They share the same dad, who is not a nice guy. It seemed like they were gonna like build the relationship between the two sisters, because it's made clear that they don't have a very good foundation, that they didn't really grow up together, so they don't know each other that well. But it seems like her younger half sister really wants to get to know her and really wants to like be around her. I thought that they would like show the relationship build up. In the end, it's clear that they're in each other's lives, but there's just the in-between of leading up to like the strength of their relationship wasn't shown, and I feel like she kind of like missed an opportunity there in telling more of that story. In this book, the conflict was not strong enough for me. I don't think it was like worth getting upset about. I just felt like it was kind of lame. It was just like, why are you mad? But obviously like she gets over it, and there is a grand gesture at the end, which is cute. I still enjoyed the book. Again, I read it in 2 days. It wasn't a very like long book. I don't think it was more than like 300 pages, but I just gave it 3 stars. In the month of June, I read 4 books. I was really proud of myself for reading that many books in 1 month, and I've already surpassed my goal of like reading 1 book a month, which means like I would have read 12 books this year, and I've already read over 12 books. So those are all the books that I read in the past 6 months. You know, obviously I'm not a booktuber, and I'm not a booktoker, and I'm not a bookstagramer. I'm not like someone who is credible as someone you should listen to for book recommendations. But if you're starting to get into reading, I had a good variety of different books that I started reading, and then I found my stride of like what I really liked. Which is romance, which I should have known, because when I was younger, that's all that I would read too. So I don't know who I was freaking kidding. But anyways, thanks for sticking around so long. I have a feeling it's gonna be a really long video to edit. But yeah, hopefully at the end of this year, I'll have another book roundup of like the rest of the books that I read in the second half of the year. And yeah, I'll try and be a little bit more thorough in terms of like rating them and giving a synopsis and kind of like giving my full opinion and whether or not you should read the book. If you have booktokers or bookstagrammers or booktubers that you want to recommend to me, and I want to preface saying that like I want people who are not really on the radar. I want people that have like less than 5,000 followers that you think are, you know, gold mines, that have like really great suggestions. Leave them in the comments below, because I'm very interested. I'm obsessed with watching people do like book vlogs and like Barnes and Noble hauls and all that. I'm like obsessed. So yeah, let me know down below. Serve the community, and let me know what you've been reading. I'm very curious, hoping that I can find some like hidden gems that people, you know, don't recommend as often. But yeah, thank you for sticking around. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.